afternoon, friends. Today we have a guest who has already been on our channel before, I think even twice, Denis Yeliseievich, and I have been following Denis for the past 3 years. I observe because I see the transformation of his image, the transformation of his thinking from living in the United States of America, and I see the consistency, the constant with which Denis continues his narrative. He resists the lawlessness, the injustice that he faced as a brother in Ukraine, and he had to leave. I fully understand that this young man who went against the lawlessness of the system has many supporters and detractors. I am well aware that not everyone likes Denis. Many people don't accept him and say, but how? He's a fugitive. He ran away from the front. He ran away from the war. So right now, I want Denis to simply remind us why he actually left and what the war has to do with it. Repetition is the mother of learning. Very briefly.
I'll repeat it just for you because you, as the host of the broadcast, asked, maybe for new people, for those who don't like me. I'm not trying to be liked. That's the whole point, you see. I know that a lot of people don't like me, especially in America, our immigrants and immigrants in general. I didn't leave because of the war. I encountered it in Kyiv. Throughout the war, I lived and did business there without issues for nearly 87 months. But, as everyone already knows, or most people do, I made the mistake of opening this channel and expressing my thoughts there, which, by the way, for the first 3 or 4 months didn't really go against the general understanding. Because back then, it was a very difficult situation when the authorities truly found themselves in the same boat as the people. Then other events happened when we had already broken away from Russia, and that's when the first Istanbul agreements took place. So the YouTube channel also led to various problems, essentially to persecution. The only thing I still believe I did right is that I didn't wait for something catastrophic to happen. I understood perfectly well that things were getting dangerous. I sensed that moment and left, and about a year or a year and a half later, I still want to return to Ukraine. But after a year or a year and a half, I even had thoughts. Maybe I shouldn't have left. Maybe somehow now. I realized I just wouldn't have been able to. Even without the persecution, I couldn't live in the country as it is now.
In a dictatorship, you said the word a dictatorship, you said you wouldn't be able to live in such a country. In this country, there are far fewer citizens now than there used to be. I'm just reminding you that since 1991, when there were 52 million people in Ukraine, how many are left now?
According to certain data, 28 million, around 28 million.
Now, a terrible war for survival is underway. I see a huge number of young guys who are here now who came under different pretexts, but they made it to America. In your opinion, since you've been living in America for 3 years now, has American society's perception of what's happening in Ukraine changed over time? Or do you look at America through the eyes of a Ukrainian? And what do you see in America and what do you see in Ukraine? From here, from this American side, I'm not saying you're American. No, I'm American, have been for a long time. You're a citizen of Ukraine living in America. So what's your perspective? Time from across the ocean.
I'll tell you, I still look at everything through the lens of being a citizen of Ukraine. Even with all that, while I was still in Kyiv, it turned out I understood many issues quite well. But even I, like everyone living in Ukraine now, still ended up in an information vacuum. One way or another, plus the atmosphere has an effect. After a year, exactly a year after I left, I started to see many things differently. That's exactly because you're looking at it from the outside with a clear head, not when you're directly involved there in some way, a participant in the events.
Can you be more specific? Because in this case, specifics are very important. Many events are vague.
Look, specificity in this sense is when you live in such a specific country as Ukraine, some things already seem normal to you, even though they're not actually normal. When you step away from it and look at what's happening from the outside, you see even more things that are actually not normal at all. And how much I used to make huge compromises in my life living in such a country, that's what I mean.
Well, I can tell you that a lot of people don't become conformists and leave. That's one of the main reasons I left many years ago. It's just that some people realized this in the 20s of the 21st century, and I realized it at the end of the 20th century. I saw how Ukraine was divided, how they were cutting up this country. I saw how the oligarchs came to power and what they ended up doing. They bought politicians, they traded the country. They traded interests, but now there's war. I'll ask about the oligarchs. We keep hearing that Ukraine needs money, 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 and more money. We don't hear anything else. Ukraine needs weapons, needs money. I keep reminding everyone how Ukraine got rid of its weapons, Ukraine, over the past years. And now the war has come, and the oligarchs, they quietly and calmly took their capital out. They are taking their money out. Tell me, do you have any examples of Ukrainian oligarchs helping their homeland, wherever they may be?
Oligarchs definitely help. That's another question. I'm not really a supporter of any help or even being in the army as some kind of indulgence, believe me. For example, Renat Akhmetov helps a lot, but we've lived like this our whole lives. A lot of bad things have been done by someone there. I won't speak personally about him, but bad things have been done. He built a stadium or started a foundation there, so it's like he already has an indulgence. I'm against that approach and its semi-feudal attitude. Believe me, they do help. Some of them are in the Monaco battalion, if you've heard of that term. They're in Monaco, and believe me, many of them didn't take anything out. They didn't have anything in Ukraine to begin with, but many still do. For example, Poroshenko, Kolomoisky, some from Bogolyubov, and now Akhmetov all still hold many assets. So many people really do have a lot there.
And how is it that the deputies of the Verkhovna Rada, these so-called servants who came in, suddenly become millionaires? I'll tell you about a Cossack who was a Cossack on the Maidan. When he got into the Rada, he immediately got a Mercedes. Those are the kinds of details. These are the things you always notice from here, and not just from here. And people somehow quietly, calmly swallowed it all, accepted it all, and lived with this kind of morality. Well, yes, it's power. Power is sacred. It's holy. What do you think? How creative are people? To what we are seeing now, the squandering of state funds, the squandering, making money off of blood, during a terrible war. I'd like to hear something like everything for the front, everything for victory someday. I have something to compare it to. I compare it to World War II and the First World War, when bonds were issued and every American paid for it. And the oligarchs, not just oligarchs, but millionaires and billionaires, they paid for it, and everything went to the front and everything went for victory. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Let's separate these topics, since the second part of your question is a separate and serious issue. Regarding the deputies, I'll start with Kazakh Gavrilyuk, whom you mentioned. Believe me, he's the most harmless character. Because this current convocation, the one that's now in the Verkhovna Rada, half of them are people who were recruited through advertisements. I mean, some random photographers, absolutely unknown people, and we see how they behave. There are defectors like Artyom Dimitruk, who claims Ukraine should join Russia and Belarus. He actually joined through Zelensky's party. The question is, how did they recruit these people? How did Medvedchuk's godfather get involved? And how do they make money? A parliamentary inquiry costs money, solving any issue costs money, influence costs money, lobbying costs money. And of course, they came in hungry and, to put it bluntly, started lining their own pockets. But that didn't make them any greater as individuals. Some people deserve particular shame. As a former athlete, I can mention professional John Belinyuk. an Olympic wrestling champion. He came to the Verkhovna Rada and just disgraced himself. Vasily Verostyuk did the same thing. Sports were disgraced a lot. It's just a disgrace. Mariana Bezuglaya is not in an adequate state at all. I mean, it's like a freak show. It's a circus, but it's not funny at all because this is what's happening in the country. Second part, all for the front, all for victory. I actually think this is already a misconception of those people who don't really understand Ukraine. Everything for the front, everything for victory. It couldn't have happened in such a corrupt country. This war couldn't have been won by definition. It shouldn't have been allowed. And so often many politicians here say we need to put the country on a war footing, but no one explains what that means, and no war footing is possible. And because what you can give, I can give. And Chernyshov and Mindish will steal 20 billion hryvnias, $500 million from defense structures, and that's just the big ones. And then everyone else steals smaller amounts. It's like, you know, there was a Soviet slogan, don't start with yourself. I did, you did, we all started with ourselves, but Ermak didn't start with himself. And still, we started, and another million people did, but Ermak didn't start with himself. Everything flows from the top down. It's an illusion. So as a pragmatist, I advise everyone to be realistic. Reality is both harsher and more beautiful. Phrase, it's nice to say that here to me in an interview or to someone else, but in practice it doesn't work. Examples can illustrate this.
The reason I'm asking this question is because since 2014, my family and I, along with thousands of other families, have been helping Ukraine. I remember how we sent diapers because there were no diapers. I'm not talking about weapons. We sent diapers, without which it was impossible in the hospital at all. To the wounded guys on the front line, I want to remind you that diapers were once created by Americans for snipers. So this isn't something we should have even talked about at all. We sent that. We sent helmets. We sent bulletproof vests. I remember it well. We raised money for the Donbas battalion. I kept trying to answer my American friends who were puzzled, wondering if there really weren't any diapers. And now we collect donations on every show, and people bring tourniquets. Those very tourniquets that cost $25 and save people's lives. That's what we're talking about, how to deal with it, and we read about it. At the same time, I want to emphasize once again that I'm not judging anyone for anything. I'm a citizen of another country. I'm stating what I see. I see this asphalt that they change every time. I understand that all these bridges are beautiful, all of this is wonderful, but then it's bombed and destroyed, and there aren't enough drones, and there isn't enough of something else. What should we do about this? Explain to me and my hello Americans, my friends who keep asking the same questions. How is it possible?
Elena, I'll tell you, this is what it's called. The government failed in its duties. To be honest, the government failed. It didn't warn about the war. It didn't evacuate. It did nothing. In short, it did absolutely nothing, represented by Zelensky and Yermak. But now it's making a lot of demands, and unfortunately, many people are picking up on that. Go and die for this country. Well, that's not how this system works. Honor and praise to those who are ready to do it, but that's not how the system works. I can give you even more outrageous examples than anything you've said. People I know were collecting money for nails and chain link fencing. These are things that can be produced in Ukraine. I don't know in what quantities. And it's just ridiculous that people have to collect money for this. I'm not talking about drones now. So is the government neglecting its duties? You cited bridges and roads, but they're actually not building any bridges. And the tenders are absolutely ridiculous. And besides those tenders, like the infrastructure ones, there are also just the costs of running the government. What is Javier Milei doing now? In Argentina, he has halved government spending. Let's say that's exactly what needs to be done in Ukraine. But today we have a situation. I recently gave an interview on air. We were discussing the city of Mariupol. The mayor is currently in France making videos saying, I'm gaining experience here. We'll win Mariupol back. I'll come back and implement it. While the city of Mariupol still exists today. Tenders are ongoing and some trams are bought, but after Putin's annexation, everything remains on paper despite large sums of money involved. Yes, and it's about more than just Mariupol. Many other territories are involved. Currently, Serhiy Haidai, former Luhansk governor, has been detained. The man was stealing for 10 years. Putin took over the Luhansk region 10 years ago, and he worked there for many years. That position is all about money, and now he's exposed exposed as a major thief. We all suspected this, but hopefully it will be proven. That's all. We just need to honestly admit that we are not able to fight. If our Western partners stop helping us now, the war will be over. We can't let it come to that. We need to find a way out of this situation. There is a way out, but it would instantly end Zelensky's power. That's the responsibility. They won't do it. But if we're discussing what's right for the people and country, that's the only way. Without it, we achieve nothing on our own.
Do you see anyone, let's say, any person who could lead the country in the state it's in right now? We're talking about the fact that the lower classes don't want to and the upper classes can't. In fact, but we have a war, and completely different laws of wartime are in effect, or they're not in effect, or they only apply to some people. What should we do in this situation?
These don't apply to everyone. I won't name anyone since people are expecting.
I'm not asking for names. I'm asking about the methods, about the technologies.
You need to come to it, just like now. For some, it might not sound that scary. Come and make reforms. But even during the war, as I already said, cutting government spending is number one. But the war needs to end. Anyway, the state of war will remain. It's unsuitable for normal life, for the development of history. Anyway, first of all, right now, we need to think about how to end the war, and it can only be ended by one compromise.
Now you've come to the main point, compromise. How much is Ukraine ready for compromise, and to what extent will the enemy make concessions? And how effective are these mediation efforts, which have led to nothing over the past years? All these negotiations in Istanbul and elsewhere are just empty talk. What should be done in this situation, in the reality we face?
This is the reality. We need to abandon the course toward NATO, which was fake from the start, and adopt neutrality like Austria, armed neutrality in cooperation with NATO, but without NATO membership. That's the first thing. And the second, we must stop escalating tensions over language and acknowledge Russian, not as a second official language, but simply recognize its existence. More than half the population speaks it, it can be used in business, and it can be spoken in the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. In Israel, there is an Arab party in the Knesset and everything is fine. In Belgium, too. 4 languages in your ear. If you don't understand, you have an earpiece in your ear. That's not a problem. This issue is not politicized there, but here it is politicized. These are the key points. Just to bargain over territory like Putin, take this, leave that, or let's split at the current line and freeze it. No, that's the issue. Many, especially your audience, don't get this. They think it's about territory, but it isn't. The point is that United States Agency for International Development was pumping up Ukraine for 10 years, turning it into anti-Russia, but only on the surface. Inside, it's still the same Russia. As shown by Zelensky, he created Russia 2.0 using Putin-like dictatorial methods. That's where the stumbling block is. If we split now at the line of demarcation, people may see it as a good compromise, but the hostility will persist. That is, when a public figure speaks Russian, agents from certain special services, media agents, start putting pressure on them. Maybe you've heard, for example, about the blogger Shalkim, that kind of scandal. She left for Dubai, she was simply hounded, and she's also a competitor in business for some people because advertisers go to her, they hounded her. Are you speaking Russian? So you start getting massively attacked by accounts with millions of followers, almost making you out to be a traitor to your country. Because it's beneficial to someone, and right now it's being fueled in the country. There was a fight in Odessa because someone was listening to Russian music. Once again, you hear about someone in Odessa playing music. But it's not a question of who is more Ukrainian or less. That doesn't exist. Politicians made that up, and now Ukraine will be drowning in this. Do you think these ideas of radical nationalism are normal? Right now, Ukraine is covered with ads without titles, without names, without surnames, nationalist groups, organizations for young men. What kind of young men will go there? Well, let's be honest, mostly from not very successful families. Their parents probably didn't pay enough attention to their child. A young man comes there, they give him weapons, some kind of uniform, make him do push-ups. He starts to feel like he's somebody. They brainwash him, and then he says, that's it. Ukraine's goal is lifelong resistance to Russia. That's the current reality, and it's frightening. This isn't a new development. It's not just an enthusiast, but a true nationalist. He sat in the forest. Let me clarify. There's a lot of money involved. It's being supervised. Whose interests are at stake? First, for Putin, it's perfect. There's a reason to start a hybrid war, then a full-scale one. And second, Some forces want to weaken Russia at Ukraine's expense. You've heard people say Ukraine is Europe's shield. I don't want to be that shield.
Let's now move on to a topic that, for example, really worried me about 10 days ago. Now it is developing. I'm talking about the update on the direct negotiations between Zelensky and Putin. What struck me the most about this, even 10 days ago? What struck me was that President Zelensky initiated these negotiations. Why did it surprise me? Yes, because the point is that back on September 30, 2022, Zelensky signed a decree. This is a decree by the President and adopted by the National Security Council of Ukraine, stating that Ukraine does not conduct direct negotiations with the enemy. As President, Zelensky himself cancels this decree because it was Zelensky who initiated the direct negotiations. I'm asking a simple, specific question, but I didn't understand.
I need to clarify with you. Where did you get the information that Zelensky initiated this?
That Zelensky initiated this. Absolutely. All Western media outlets are reporting this, starting today with Newsweek and Associated Press, and yesterday it was information from other similar American sources. There's a very interesting website that I found, because I look for a lot of interesting things. The website that's directly connected to the American military is the Defense Port. It's a dedicated defense website, and everything there is clear and straightforward. Negotiators from Moscow and Kiev discussed the possibility of a meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin during talks in Istanbul this week, Zelensky said in comments published on Friday. This is from the 25th. That is, my sources are not Russian. I don't use Russian sources, although sometimes holding my nose I have to read them anyway.
I don't use Russian sources at all. Why would I do that?
I gave you the name of the website.
No matter what website it is, that's an incorrect interpretation of the information. Zelensky can't seek negotiations since ending the war would mean a tribunal for him. Simply put, it's a loss of power and various legal issues like isolation and prosecution. Actually, that's what's going to happen. So it's false. Another thing is that now Zelensky has figured out how to play along with Trump by watching Putin and President Trump like, I'm ready, let's do it. You see, he's the one who doesn't want to. That's how it all happens, but the press interprets it, or someone reads him and interprets it in their own way. Zelensky doesn't want negotiations. Zelensky is playing a game in front of Trump. I said, Putin is bad, so give me money and weapons, and I'll keep ruling for another 20 years.
Ukraine continues. I'm just reading what's written in yesterday's issue of Newsweek. Ukraine keeps losing ground on the front line. Patsanka is there. As a result of Russian bombings in urban areas, more than 12,000 civilians have been killed. Despite Donald Trump's direct calls to Vladimir Putin to stop the bombings, they continue. Last Monday, that is, a week ago, Donald Trump set a new ceasefire deadline for Vladimir Putin in Ukraine, approximately 10 to 12 days later. We know that Witkoff's arrival is expected in Moscow this week. According to Trump, Witkoff is supposed to arrive in the Russian capital on Wednesday or Thursday. After the trip to Israel and the Gaza Strip, Russia issued a nuclear warning directed against the United States and NATO. I'm saying that I always name the source that writes this. So, can you argue with these sources? Why do you think your point of view is correct and the sources that provide direct quotes are wrong? If these sources, there are several, 5 or 6 sources, are all simultaneously talking about and referring to the Istanbul meeting on July 24th and 25th of last month, and they say that the attempts were initiated specifically by the President of Ukraine, what evidence do you have? What is your evidence base to say that this is not true?
These are just the words of some journalist against my words. If you're talking about sources, I have them too, but that's not the point right now, that some sources told me something. It's a matter of interpretation and Zelensky's actions at that time. Also, to publish an article for Zelensky in a hypothetical Politico. I'm not sure about today, but a month ago I had major problems. And in any other globalist publication, so it's silly to refer to that. There's a lot of nonsense written, especially by globalists and even sometimes by right-wing publications. Journalism isn't as straightforward as it used to be. Remember those unnecessary articles?
I write about this all the time because I have complete distrust. But when I refer to something, I gave you a website that's actually from the American defense. It's completely outside of politics. It gives dry information. These are military people. All right, I can say that. On Sunday, Trump said that Russia has proven to be quite good at bypassing sanctions. Yes, that's Trump, he said, quote, "They're cunning people," he said about the Russians. On Monday, that is yesterday. Zelensky once again called on the plan to introduce tougher secondary sanctions against the Russian energy, trade, and banking sectors. Russia stated that the sanctions, first imposed after the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, have had a limited impact. So what are we talking about if the sanctions aren't working? How do we keep up the pressure? Russia is responding to Trump's actions regarding nuclear submarines near its shores, and it is already starting to threaten America. And in absolutely all the materials I've read, in all of them, it was mentioned that it was Zelensky who initiated these negotiations. So I have one question. How was that even possible? I phrase it like this. How could you just ignore the fact that you signed the decree? And is it possible to manage in 2025 without direct negotiations?
You can't manage without direct negotiations. He didn't revoke the decree. It was issued by the National Security and Defense Council. It's a resolution that prohibits it. Nothing has been cancelled. It's still in effect. It's just that Ukraine is such a wonderful country where you can do whatever you want. I keep telling you, Zelensky isn't starting any negotiations. For him, it's death or the war's end. As for everything else, yes, Biden's sanctions didn't really affect Putin much. President Trump's sanctions will affect him differently. Will this end the war? There are no guarantees. Negotiations, of course, are needed in 2025, but negotiations only make sense when both sides are ready for compromise. When Putin put his declaration, his manifesto on the table, it said, "Give up 4 regions." Zelensky says Ukraine will join NATO and the European Union and ban Russian language, but such talks go nowhere. And here Trump's task is exactly to cool things down. How can this be done for Putin? With sanctions or with a sweetener that can be offered in exchange? If you agree to this, here are the benefits you'll get. For example, lifting previous sanctions as one of the mechanisms. For Zelensky, it's just about resources. And also political pressure, the things that have been happening recently in Kyiv. I mean, the protests. I told viewers about this in late May and early June, and I can tell your viewers too. There will be interesting events at the end of August and in September. Because President Zelensky will be pushed away from power, including by President Trump, just informally.
Well, once again, I never interfere in Ukraine's internal politics because I can only observe and comment on something. I don't vote. I can agree with you that one of the main reasons why people no longer want to talk to Ukraine at the level we would like is precisely the government that is currently in power in Ukraine. It has discredited itself. No matter what people say, now they'll attack me, calling him a patriot and wonderful. I only know one thing that I liked. Washington and Kyiv have agreed on a deal worth between $10 and $30 billion for the supply of drones from Ukraine to the United States. That's absolutely normal. Ukraine will earn this money. America will get the drones it also needs. This is one of the steps. How do you feel about this, about such a direct exchange? Useful military ones. consequences.
Yes, I have consistently and openly advocated for allied relations with the United States for a long time. It's different when considering their realism and meaning. With Zelensky, any cooperation with Zelensky and Yermak, any cooperation will simply strengthen their power and prolong the war. I'm glad this is recorded for history and future relations, but it won't benefit Ukraine's development or its citizens. Second, about realism. Do you think Ukraine is capable of handling such a tough war? And this is a drone war, as we already know. To produce such a number of drones and even supply them to America, believe me, it's not that simple. By the way, 30% is stolen from the drones.
That's interesting. Tell us, how exactly are these 30% stolen? And I just know that the technology, these drones, I talk to people, I have people who are directly involved in this invention, so I think I have some specific information. I know that what Ukrainian minds, Ukrainian engineers have done deserves the deepest attention and respect. But you just raised the question of whether Ukraine has enough of all this, whether Ukraine can sell and buy the equipment it lacks, anti-missile equipment.
Well, as you first asked, how is it possible to steal? Suppose we start a drone business and pitch our products to the Ministry of Defense for sale. I dreamed about it. That's how they tactfully inform us. Well, then you'll need to overprice it by 30%, for example, but that's only if they tell you to. And believe me, they won't say anything. You just won't get in there unless you're affiliated. There are last names under Zelensky who oversee this, who are involved in it. They're building their own production, and they're the ones selling it because they have everything at their fingertips in the Ministry of Defense. And it's not a matter of, as you say, everything for the front, everything for victory. No, first it's for my own pocket, and then basically the front is question number 2 or 3. That's one scheme, but there's also a different story. That's when you have media personalities who collect billions or hundreds of millions of hryvnias through these donations. You buy drones and make money on it. You collect them, sell them to the Ministry of Defense, add a markup, and make a profit. So you started a guaranteed business with other people's money. You don't have to enter any market, deal with competitors, or wonder who to sell to. Everything is already set up. You took money. I won't say from whom, from our naive people. I did all this, so why speak out now? There can be no compromise. Things are very bad. Unfortunately, Americans, especially through the democratic press, are being shown that things there are still mostly okay. No, everything is very bad. Everything is sad. Zelensky has turned Ukraine into a banana republic.
You mentioned the name Prytula. I have questions about that name, about that person. How did he, by raising money for these drones, make so much money?
I didn't mention Prytula. You must have thought so. Maybe you immediately thought of him. He has a big foundation. Both ordinary people and businesses donate to it. I have a million questions about that foundation. But if all this was quiet, this Prytula comes out and makes a loud statement, everyone to the front. But I won't be there. I'm special. I'm privileged. And you're all not like me. He can approach someone when a subscriber asks the commentator an uncomfortable question. Even though it wasn't serious, he can say some main directorate of intelligence guys will come see you now. So he threatens people. You see, these are really scary things. And he's not the only one like that. So this is all a big project and about making money.
Tell me, I have, you could say, a personal enemy. It's Oksana Markarova, because thanks to her and her actions, she drove a huge wedge between Ukraine and America when she openly works. Why do all Ukrainian politicians openly support and have supported the so-called Democrats and spit towards those whom the majority of America voted for Trump three times? I want to emphasize, when people talk to me about the year 2020, those were also stolen elections, and now we can see it. What do you think that, is this a lack of information or is it distorted information? For example, some former friends told me, we don't care what Trump writes, we're being robbed here. How about you, who once lived in Ukraine? Do you ever wake up and feel Ukrainian blood on your lips? These are the kinds of things I have to hear, and they make me think once again. You help Ukraine, and yet people spit on you. And so they spat on Trump, they spat on the Republicans. You see this from the inside yourself. What could you say about it? They went with citizens who don't understand many things.
I think we talked for the first time at the end of 22 or the beginning of 23. And as you remember,
22.
Yes, I supported President Trump back then, even before the election campaign started. Thanks to Trump, we learned what I was talking about. For example, despite years in Ukraine and knowing its workings, I didn't realize the scale. An organization like United States Agency for International Development, the Soros globalists, created 200 state organizations, non-governmental organizations. These organizations have completely taken over the media in Ukraine, meaning 95% of the media is funded by United States Agency for International Development, which used to give $10 billion a year. That's a huge amount of money. Popular journalists like Bikus with millions of followers were there, along with some leaked documents. For example, he's given $400,000 for 10 episodes to make 10 episodes a year for $400,000, and that's not taxed. Nothing, you see, and tell me, if I had done what I did, if there hadn't been a war, I would have been doing business in Ukraine, like before. I have no chance. I have no chance. I'm being marginalized. I'm being pushed out. These media outlets, which are controlled, they didn't publish anything about the lawlessness of the territorial recruitment centers, nor about this terrible mobilization, nor about human rights violations, nor about the shooting in the back near the checkpoint, nor about the theft. They weren't interested in anything, just peace and quiet. There's democracy in Ukraine, the money's coming in, the narratives are set, so just do your job. They ignore political immigrants. Yermak and Zelensky sent 5 security service of Ukraine agents to raid my mom's and grandma's apartment at 5 a.m. My mom shared my video where I'm discussing things just like I'm doing with you right now. And they opened a criminal case against her, and the trial is still ongoing for justifying Russian aggression. Well, you understand, it's just simple. And no one called. They didn't care. It's about rights, Trump, his supporters, and dismissing us. We need a left-wing agenda. Soros is fueling Ukraine with hatred, saying that only the Ukrainian language has the right to exist, basically denying real things. But the reality is that Ukraine is not in NATO. At least half of the people speak Russian, they speak it. So let's just acknowledge this reality. No, instead, let's keep fueling things. Let's breed professional nationalists, spread hostility, and intimidate people. It was all so frightening. When I saw the scale of these documents here, when it was all revealed, when Trump declassified them, it was all the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. I'm shocked. Ukraine never had a chance. That's the root of the problems. Because if this hadn't happened, then people like me who come up with alternative ideas would have had a chance. I can present my idea to society, but when billion-dollar funding is used to attack you, you have no chance against all of that. This isn't democracy. That's the root of the problem. You asked about people. What do you want? Well, it's the people who are to blame. I blame those in charge, those who make the decisions. The decisions are made by officials. It's people's stupidity to keep stepping on every rake in the world over and over again and keep banging their heads. We've already been shown everything. We've figured it all out. Let's get involved. But not everyone wants that. To put it mildly,
the last question is very important. What do you think about this human resource that's fighting? I'm talking about people who go and give their lives. We see these huge hectares of cemeteries. But will there be enough young, healthy defenders in Ukraine who will passionately go and give their lives? I understand that there is such a thing as fighting for your homeland. I understand. It's very close to me. These things are sacred. But every time people give their lives, scoundrels come to power.
you know, I really don't like it when the mobilization resource is treated as a human resource. They speak beautifully on screens, but all they really think about is meat. I am a staunch opponent of this kind of war of attrition. I'm a staunch opponent of this kind of mobilization. There won't be enough young people. We had 400,000 go absent without leave, 400,000. That's half the army, half the army. 40% went absent without leave. Nobody wants to fight. They're being grabbed off the streets, as shown in those videos. That's why I'm saying the war needs to end, because we all know the story of Paraguay. when 70% of the men were wiped out. There's already a demographic catastrophe in Ukraine. This won't lead to anything. Young people are dying. As you said, a kilometer-long cemetery is tragic. Many villages are gone. It's a nightmare. And here we have Haidai, Yermak, and Chernyshov who have stolen billions of hryvnias. It can't be like that. And by the way, you said there's a sacred state there, but for me, what's sacred is human freedom and a person's right to make decisions, not the state. Someone said patriotism is the last refuge of scoundrels, and that's true here. That's why a person themselves, no collectivism. A person is born free and should make their own decisions without any judgment.
Thank you for your honesty. Tomorrow I will have someone who has been fighting since 2014, Denis Malikin. He is in the army. He is on the front line. He was seriously wounded. They brought him back from the brink of death, and he still keeps fighting. He has a different point of view. I want to thank you for your honesty and for your position. We can agree or disagree. We have a platform that is for everyone so that we can understand what the situation is like in Ukraine right now. We are people who do not live in Ukraine. People living in Ukraine may also hear and understand a slightly different perspective on what is happening in their country. This is the Continent Channel with Yelena Prigova. We are people who care, so we raise very pressing questions and try to find answers to them. Denis Yeliseievich, we are not very attractive.
Thank you for the invitation.
I hope that we will meet more often and exchange some ideas. From my American perspective, and you from your American and Ukrainian perspective.
American Ukrainian, yes.
Yes. You should always remember that the bell always rings for you, so everyone should just hear this ringing. All the best to you. Peace in Ukraine. Victory as much as possible. Peace to your homes. Goodbye.
Goodbye.